online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Go live.
29 minutes to 8, you at SAFM. We're setting up TV cameras here because we're going to go live in a moment on SABC 2. Griselda Lewis is here and we will be talking to Patiswa Makopeni, Group Executive News and Current Affairs. Some exciting news coming up on SABC. While we're getting that all set up, let's take some of your voice notes. 0614 104 107.
Morning, SAFM. Morning. There is a statement which says, "In a hungry man is an angry man." This is going to happen in our future. You find people, they will be angry, and the way they're angry, you can't control it as a world. Because of the planned thing of this COVID, people losing jobs, not paid for months and months. Watch this space. Watch this space. Something's going to happen in the future.
Good morning, John. This is Ntobeko Kubon from Mchwalum. John, I see that people are now going to be indirectly forced to vaccinate because they're going to be asking for vaccination proof. My question is, what's going to happen if we find that the infections are still on the rise? If these infections still do occur after people have been vaccinated, what's going to happen? What's going to be the next step for the government to try and then stop or decrease the infection rate? Because even if people are vaccinated, they can still get infected. So what are you going to do after that now? Thank you.
I want to advise workers to join trade unions so that in instances like the one where the employer is refusing to pay, where the employer is forcing you to report for duty whilst there's a COVID positive test, you can have an institution that can stand up and defend you. I'm advising workers to belong to trade unions. That's the only advice I want to issue to that gentleman. This is Matwaha, East London. Thanks a lot.
You're with SAFM. Those are your voice notes. 0614 104 107. We're about to go live to SABC 2 now. Sakina's introducing us. It's quite scary, actually. This is it's difficult to do. Sakina's introducing Griselda Lewis, who's in studio here. And Griselda, you're going to hear Griselda any minute now, who will talk to Sakina as Sakina's introducing Griselda, who's sitting watching the TV camera. She's staring into it quite intently. It's really exciting radio. Don't forget, you can send more voice notes, 0614 104 107, but I think we're going to cross in a second, keeping Sakina up on the screen. You can also SMS 41391, and we are live, I think, just about.
Well, that's right. We are live. A very good morning to you, Sakina. Welcome to our viewers on SABC2, the SABC News Channel 404, as well as here at SAFM, Radio Meets Television. Very exciting moment for us here at the SABC. We're full already into, campaigning for the elections. You've seen a number of political parties already out trying to sway South Africans to vote for them in the upcoming local government elections. And the preparation for the Sakina starts way before the South Africans would go to the polls. So the campaigning, the SABC has a duty to cover all political parties. So today, very important, what's happening? Radio Meets Television. We are at the SAFM studios here. Don Gericke is here. We've taken over his studio now. He's going to come in very shortly. And we'll also be speaking to the Group Executive of News and Current Affairs, Patiswa Makopeni, very shortly about the SABC state of readiness to cover these local government elections. But most importantly, what plans are being put in place to ensure that communities and the different municipalities are able to ensure that their voices are heard? What are their service delivery demands? Have the municipalities been delivering? We'll cover those who have and those who have not. So coming up this Sunday, and hosted, of course, by the lady who just crossed to us now from the Morning Live studio, Sakina Kamwendo, at 8 o'clock on Sunday. Service Delivery Gauge will be debuting. Sakina Kamwendo, you, of course, will be anchoring that starting at 8 o'clock in the evening. And you'll basically be giving voices to these communities on whether these municipalities have delivered in those areas. We'll also be highlighting the good in those particular areas as well. But we'll speak to the SABC's executive very shortly. John, morning.
What I'm excited about, and I was just watching the trailer. It was on the telly just before we crossed now. Is municipal elections, these local elections are all about service delivery.
Absolutely.
These are the feet on the road. It's the people that do the rubbish. It's the people that supply our local electricity, water, the important things. Yeah. And that's what you're voting for in this. And I think this little program is going to be so important to find out what sort of service has been delivered, if any changes are going to come. Because what's the point of maybe voting for the same thing all the time? Maybe what's the point of voting for a new person if the old people are doing okay? Yeah. This will go onto the road. As you heard, Sakina was standing in the traffic there, which is great.
Absolutely. We've started with that already. You'd seen on Morning Live over the past couple of days, my colleagues in the Eastern Cape, SABC news reporters countrywide, our reach far and wide, going into communities that our competitors possibly wouldn't reach. And that's what we'll be covering. People still being able to, are still getting water from reservoirs. Sure. And the protests that are taking place there will bring all of that, but we'll also be highlighting some of these communities. Absolutely. There has been some work that has been done. Let's bring in the Group Executive of News and Current Affairs now, Patiswa Makobeni. Ms. Makobeni, very good morning to you. Thanks indeed for your time. Let's start, first of all, with, this program that is launching on Sunday. Sakina Kamwendo will be the anchor of that, but it's to give voice to these communities, their challenges, what has been delivered and what has not been delivered.
Good morning, Griselda, and good morning, John. Good morning to all our viewers on the different platforms where we are broadcasting right now. Yes, the show is launching on Sunday. It's going to air on SABC2 and the SABC News channel between 8 and 9 in the evening. And you're absolutely right. Local government elections are about service delivery. So we are taking this story where it belongs. So our coverage is going to be at a street level because that's where stuff is happening. And you're also correct in saying that we are going to balance our coverage. And it's also about citizens' experiences. And we are not going to distort that, and we're not going to dilute that. Their views matter, and we are going to reflect them as they are, without taking anything away from their lived experiences. But the other part is public affairs coverage is boring by its very nature. That's what people say. But that's what we are about as a public news service. Public affairs is costly, but nothing is as costly as not covering it, because what it does is service delivery issues talk to human dignity. They talk to human rights. So if you are going to ignore public affairs, which talks to those elements, what it means is that something that we tend to say as journalists, because it makes us feel good about our work, that we are the voice of the voiceless. Actually, we're not. We are not the voice of the voiceless. And there's something that I like that Arundhati Roy talks about when she talks about the voiceless, that there is no such thing as the voiceless. They are deliberately silenced, and they're preferably unheard. And we cannot afford that, because once the national discourse excludes those voices, a lot happens in the dark, and we cannot afford that happening. So the service delivery gauge is more or less a sister show to what we did with Democracy Gauge.
Yes.
But this time around, it's right at street level. It's at street level.
One of the big issues that you mentioned is you're trying to do this balance, but you might find that difficult. Maybe there's just no real good stories. Is that something that you will, or will you go and find good stories on purpose, almost, to try and get 50-50?
We're not going to manufacture them. If the citizens say what they say, that's what we're going to reflect. It's their lived experiences. What we are going to do is to ask questions, because the same accountability that we are going to demand from the people who are supposed to deliver those services is the same that we are going to apply to the questions that we're going to ask the citizens, as in what is their role in allowing what is happening to continue happening.
We've never covered an election in a pandemic, and I think that's one of the crucial issues that the SABC needs to look at. What restrictions do you think this will come with? I mean, your newsroom, a group executive of News and Current Affairs, has been, a number of people have contracted a coronavirus. We've seen with campaigning already where journalists simply cannot cover the story without being in those communities. This is a local government elections. What restrictions do you think will come with that, and how do you plan to keep your staff safe?
We have an obligation to be inclusive in our coverage. It's in our editorial policies. So we cannot afford not to be in those communities. But our reality is, as you have seen in the past few days, we go to environments where COVID-19 protocols are not observed. And it scares me whenever I see my colleagues being exposed to such conditions, because it's not only that we are exposing them to these conditions. It could be that in 2 weeks' time, we're going to find our capacity depleted, because as they pick up infections, they go to environments where they are going to infect others. So you're going to have teams of crews that are sitting in isolation at a time we need them on the ground. We have seen our newsrooms across the country where we've had times when there was no capacity at all because the newsroom was completely depleted. We cannot afford that, and we are going to appeal to the public and political parties that are hosting these events to ensure that COVID-19 protocols are observed. It's in the interest of all of us in the elections project.
The SABC obviously has to stretch its resources, and you have to ensure that every single political party gets equitable and fair coverage in the run-up to this local government election. How does the SABC ensure that that happens? Because already you have political parties that are crying foul, who are saying that the SABC, for example, the Economic Freedom Fighters, that is saying that the SABC has some blackout on its campaign in the run-up to this election. How does the SABC balance that?
Equitable coverage is a regulated principle. ICASA prescribes it, and we cannot compromise on that. Bearing in mind that it's not only ICASA regulations that apply during the elections period, the SABC's editorial policies are applicable. We still expect it to be independent, to be impartial, to be balanced in the way we cover the stories. But the equitability principle prescribes that we cover all those who are contesting elections. It's a nightmare with the numbers that we know of candidates.
I want to jump in there because these regulations are difficult to understand. When you say equitable, does that mean the ANC, who have more candidates, say, get more coverage because they have more candidates, or does the ANC get as much as an independent who's standing in one local election?
Equitability is not the same as equal. So it's not the same thing as equal. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that smaller parties and independent candidates are reflected in our coverage. And to the extent that there are times when ICASA calls on us to submit our registers for coverage. So when you hear parties saying, we demand this, we demand that, and it's like, you don't understand the space within which we operate. And there's one thing that is explicit in our editorial policies, that no employee other than those in the newsroom, it's 5.20.7 of the editorial policies, that editorial decision-making is a legally protected issue, and it's an exclusive domain of designated editorial staff, which is the journalists in the newsroom, not even within the SABC, that we have people outside the newsroom having a say in editorial decision-making. That includes content, it includes deployment of resources, and it includes programming. That is the prerogative of the newsroom.
I just need to do some homework.
Sure.
You're listening to SAFM, and we're on SABC2 and Channel 404, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. I'm John Kerrick.
And I'm Griselda Lewis. So, Spat, I want us to talk a bit about, reading the statement, for example, from the Economic Freedom Fighters, they claim there's a blackout by the SABC on its coverage of this campaign. Is there a blackout of that? Do you plan to meet these political parties to explain? Because clearly there seems to be a misunderstanding about what equitable means. So clearly there needs to be a breakdown about what then will happen between now and when South Africans go to the vote, because you don't want political parties saying that the public broadcaster helped them lose elections or win elections. So you always want to ensure that the SABC stands by that independent and impartial, and we are seen to be behaving in that way.
There's no blackout. We are not blacking out any political party or any candidate that's contesting elections. But what we need to do is to create space for other contestants to be reflected in our coverage. So it's not going to be daily, and it's not going to be wall-to-wall coverage that the other parties seem to demand. We cannot afford that, because we have a responsibility to be inclusive in our coverage and to ensure that all candidates are covered. And here's one thing that we cannot do as SABC News. It is not our duty to keep parties in power, It is not our duty to remove parties from power. It is not our duty to put parties in power. That is a responsibility of the electorate, and we leave it to the electorate to decide.
Can you explain how decisions are made in the newsroom then? Because I think that's part of the problem, is people just don't understand what goes on there. Political parties have their manifesto launches, they have press conferences. How do you decide how you cover those stories?
Okay, let me start with the editorial setup, because people think that there's a single person who makes decisions. I don't make decisions on coverage, any coverage for that matter. I sit in the same meeting where editors sit at 8:30 in the morning, or 2:30 when we review the diary, or forward planning when we look at the week ahead. So you have the 9 regional editors that are in the different provinces. You have your specialist editors, your senior editors, that are about 6 or 8 of them. And then you have the platform editors that serve your free-to-air, the news channel, and digital platforms. And you also have your executive producers who are also at the same level. So we sit in the same meeting, we discuss our coverage. So when people single out an individual, it makes me sad, because what it also means is that without understanding what happens when we make our editorial decisions, there's also a failure to understand the regulations by ICASA. And yet those regulations are open for comment before they are gazetted to all who are interested in inputting any information on them.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about the program, which is going to be starting to air on Sunday at 8 o'clock. So does it include going into various communities? Does the SABC say we're going to far-flung areas where people otherwise feel no one is listening? Yeah. Or is it just on the surface?
It's blended. We are going to do...
Easy to go to Joburg and Pretoria, right?
It's convenient because, in fact, it costs you less to do so. Yeah. And you spend less energy to cover what's convenient and what's in your purview. But where we have to go, it's in the periphery of society. We need to go and find those voices. As I've indicated, they're not voiceless. Yeah. They have a voice. You just need to go to them and hear their stories. And that's exactly what we're going to do with that show. So it's going to be blended. And we're also going to include experts on local government issues, because these are people who know what needs to be done and who will say, here are the flaws and here's what requiring fixing. And those are the things that we're going to be dealing with on the show. And bearing in mind that this show is a Sunday, so it's a weekly, but closer to elections, we are going to be more frequent. It becomes a daily, and we're just going to confirm the times. But it's going to be on free-to-air as well, as a 30-minute program, taking exactly the same format with the views of the public, the electorate that's going to express how they've experienced local government service delivery in their areas.
It's all great being on TV. I'm on radio. How are we going to get some of this information on radio as well?
Okay. In fact, that's a good question that you're asking. Much as we have a show that's going to be on the SABC News Channel and SABC2, all the content is going to be on radio as well as our digital platform. So the information is available to all audiences, because we also have to address the issue of universal access, that it is available whenever and wherever the audiences need it.
Yeah. How do we keep journalists safe as well? That's been a concern. I guess I'm a bit biased here because I'm on the ground myself. Your teams have frequently come under attacks in some of these communities. And especially when you have, in the run-up to an election, rhetoric where people believe that the SABC is not being fair in its coverage. That directly impacts on the safety of the SABC's journalists. We've seen previously some of our colleagues in the politics department come under attack. Some of our colleagues as well, they've had their equipment stolen. So a number of things tend to happen on the ground. How does the SABC ensure that it's able to keep its people safe as well? Because these are the very people who have to go and get those stories from these communities.
When that attack happened in Alex, where Natasha and Kabinjogwin were involved,
yes,
I had to do an interview and try and explain why it is important for the communities to understand why we report the way we do, and why we have to be in those communities to cover their stories. And we are going to make the same appeal to communities that when they see us on the ground, they must understand that we are delivering a public service to them, that we give them the platform to air their views such that those who are in authority understand exactly what's happening on the ground. And as I indicated then, I'm going to state it again now. It is not our job as journalists, particularly journalists in public service, that we are going to criminalize the concerns of the citizens. We cannot delegitimize their concerns. Our job is to report and tell the stories as they emerge from the communities. But the other part is, we have seen cyberbullying. We have seen a lot that's going on online, and I can tell you now. When I switch on my phone, I'm going to see stuff. It happens all the time. And in fact, one of the things that we cannot do as SABC News and as journalists in public service, no amount of editorial bullying, no amount of intimidation, and no amount of harassment is going to sway us. We have a responsibility to the public. Our loyalty is to the citizens, and our first obligation is to the truth. That is not going to change. No harassment is going to make us change our posture, because it is prescribed and it is legal.
Then let me jump in there. Chrisella was talking about the public and what's happened in June, July. We saw that. What about political parties or supporters or actual members of the political parties that may intimidate journalists? We've seen it.
It's happening.
Where they're getting in the face of the journalists, or they get in the face of the cameras. Does the SABC have recourse for that, or is it just we're reporting it and we'll come back home and put a story together?
We deal with that as criminal act. It's criminal. You go to the police and report the case. It's criminal. Any intimidation of journalists, any attacks on journalists are criminal acts, and we are going to report them as such.
John?
Yes.
You have some?
A couple of messages are coming through. They're not all very positive. And let's be honest. Some of the messages coming through, we don't believe the SABC is unbiased. We don't believe the SABC this and that and the other thing. How are you going to, for lack of a better word, prove to the naysayers that we are, or the SABC is an independent organization, that you are telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Here's the thing. No amount of talking is going to persuade anyone. They've got to see it in our coverage. It's got to be reflected in the quality and the credibility of our coverage. So to sit here and say, we are credible, our integrity has improved, it's not going to persuade anyone. It is the texture of our coverage that's going to persuade people, and they get to see what we mean when we say we're independent and we're impartial. And I can actually tell you, no political party is happy with us, and we are very happy with that.
Then you're fine, yeah. If everybody disagrees with you, then you're doing all right, kind of, I think.
You plan to meet any of these political parties?
We're actually meeting the EFF this morning, and we're going to hear them out. But what we cannot do is to outsource our editorial decision-making.
Does this not open the door perhaps for other political parties? Perhaps other political parties might say, well, we want an audience with the SABC, because I don't think anyone's going to be happy, as you say. Everyone wants what they believe is their equitable coverage, and others will feel aggrieved. We see this often, whether it's the national elections or the local government elections. So the door open to have these kinds of discussions with all political parties?
No, we're going to meet anyone who's asking for a meeting with us. We're going to do that. But what we're going to do in those meetings is to explain the nature of our editorial decision architecture, because there is a framework within which we operate, and it includes your BCSA, your ICASAs, and your PCSAs, and the editorial policies that are all derived from the country's constitution. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But what we are not going to do is to outsource our responsibility to make editorial decisions. That we will not do.
Patricia, somebody saying quite rightly, why just now before the elections with the program, with the service delivery gauge? That can be done forever. You can do that every single week, and maybe it's not just an electioneering thing that political parties can use, but actually an education system for us and for the political parties as well.
And in fact, we're talking about that already, that maybe post-elections, it's a show that we need to keep, because service delivery issues are a daily concern to the public, and we need to monitor. And in fact, what it does, should we be able to finance the longer, the long-term approach to the program, we should be able to go back to the manifestos of the parties and say, a mid-term review, this is what you promised, where are you with that? And go to the citizens, because we always have to find evidence on the ground on the promises and the claims that are being made by political parties.
Also, a before and after almost. It's like this was
Yes.
before elections. This person's been elected. Nothing's happened, or all of this great stuff has happened in the last 6 months. That's great. Continue your work. Or sort yourselves out.
That's exactly what we need to do.
Cool.
All right, so John, I'm told that we have just about a few minutes left. Thank you very much to the group executive
Can we-
of... yeah,
I just want to go into details about the show again.
yes, absolutely.
When
Please
is
do.
it? When is it? Sakina's presenting it. When is it? How do we see it?
Yes.
You go to SABC News channel and SABC 2 on Sunday between 8 and 9 in the evening. And radio stations will have their own content around the same concept, and that information is also going to be available on the digital platforms of SABC News.
Nice and easy. Thank you
Sounds
very much.
great. Thank you very much, Group Executive of News and Current Affairs here at the SABC, Patty Somakobeni. We've taken over. I think we're going to get kicked out in the next few
Yeah,
minutes.
can we switch
Sakina.
the lights off? I like a dark radio show.
It's very dark and gloomy in here, but all of a sudden there's a lot of lights. John, thank you very much for having us in your studio this
Thank you
morning.
for letting us,
And of
yes.
course, Service Delivery Gauge on Sunday, 8 o'clock. Sakina Kamwendo, she'll be presenting that, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. You don't want to miss out on that. Communities should really participate. Thank you very much, Sakina. I think we'll hand over to you. Good luck with the show.
And while they cross over to Sakina, we on SAFM are going to take a quick break. It's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. News coming up at 8 o'clock. And then there's a great initiative happening with the Blind South Africa want the 1978 Copyright Act to be changed. Millions is spent on converting books into Braille. We'll get you details on that just after 8.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365, Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
Heritage Month on SAFM. Our power lies in our varied cultures. We live up to the definition of resilience. We overcome together. We fondly embrace our beloved Rainbow Nation.